We did it.
Today on the Gaysian podcast, we have the hilarious comedian and best-selling author, Jordan Power.
Thank you for having me on as I drink some alcohol.
Thanks so much for being on. So I want to say hello to our listeners and welcome to the Gaysian podcast, where we interview performers, writers, and entertainers about their craft while exploring their life experiences that have shaped them as artists. I'm your host, Fong Show, official spokesperson for Gay Super Cute Asians. And on today's show, I'm super excited. We have Jordan Power, author of Famous Anus Stories from a Decade Under the Sinfluence. Thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
So one of the things I appreciate most about you is, to me, you're like a true artist, because I was listening to your podcast this week. Oh, actually, are you hearing that weird? I'm hearing something weird in my ear. Like
It's a government jumping in. The Mossad, maybe?
It's a weird echo. Okay, hopefully it's not being picked up on the podcast.
Yeah, I don't hear anything on my end, but
okay, you know what? I'll get used to it as the podcast goes on. So one of the things that I love about you is, to me, you're like a true artist. Like, you have a vision and you're not willing to compromise it. And sometimes, like, no matter the personal cost, or I'm just taking a quote from your last podcast where you said, you've been doing a podcast for 16 months, and even if you're ruining your personal life and making enemies, you're still like, this is your vision and you're not willing to compromise, and you're fearless in taking risks.
Yeah. You know what? I think there's something a little off with me mentally that I would put my entire sex life on for the world. Like, I think you have to be a little mentally, something's wrong. Like, even when I tell my therapist what we did with the podcast, like interviewing a bunch of guys we had sex with, she just looks at me like, ooh. She's like, that's not healthy. But I think I come from, I have a Harvey Milk tattoo literally here, and I come from the world of like sacrificial lambs. And I think, one of the things I said when I was promoting my book is that, like, I'm so thankful for every gay man that opened a door before me that I could write a book in 2020 called Famous Anus. Like, I'm not ignorant to the fact that people had to literally get shot in the head and die for me so that they opened up a world where that would be considered somewhat normal. I mean, I have straight men that buy my book and love it. And I can't, as much as the work I want to do is opening doors for other gay men, it's like, I just have to acknowledge that other people were sacrificial lambs for me. And so, like, ruining my personal life and going through that journey, it was all to make a point. It wasn't just reckless entertainment business.
Yeah, so absolutely. So let's jump straight into your book, Famous Anus, Stories from a Decade of Sinfluence. 5 years in the making, 300 pages-ish. Available on paperback on Amazon exclusively, but available as an ebook on Kindle, iPad, anything you can think of. For our listeners, in the show notes, we'll have links to purchase the book. I've purchased it on iPad. Because that's how I usually read, but I've actually also ordered the paperback, so I'm looking forward to getting that as well.
Nice.
Yeah, so definitely, we love gay creators on this show, so definitely go out, buy Jordan's book, support him, because one of the things about your book that you were saying in your podcast is that it's not just about the money, but you want to make a statement about the commercial viability of gay men. So how is it like, when you first thought of the book, and how did you go about getting it published?
So what happened was, initially, obviously we went through this meteoric rise with the podcast, and then, all these people suddenly start to like believe in you, which I find so funny about this business. It's like, no one really believes in you until you've actually like done something for them to believe in, and then suddenly they're a big fan. Yeah. And it's funny to me. So anyways, people come out of the woodwork and they offer you, all kinds of stuff. And I'm super like, I like staying independent because I noticed that the gatekeepers entertainment business are shrinking. So my thought process is like, if I stay independent, I have total creative control. No one can cancel me. I can say what I want. I'm not doing anything at the behest of anyone. And so when I started doing that, like I've always been a writer. I've been a published writer for 11 years under my legal name, but I have like, that's why I started the podcast. And so I started talking to like different publishers, and the undertones of homophobia was so shocking to me, like in 2020, like especially doing what I was doing. Like I heard things like from major executives being like, yeah, you can't write a book for gay men because gay men don't buy books. Like just blanket statements. It was bad. Like I was shocked at how blatant they were about. And then one of them was like, you should write a book for young women. And you know, the reason I wrote this book, and as much of a cost it has to my personal life, is that when I was younger, like I'm a big reader. And when I was younger, I just like looked for that book that I needed, almost like that like gay Chelsea Handler that, that like sex, drugs, like all the things we actually did in our 20s, but that I just couldn't find for myself, that made me laugh, that, I just needed as a young person. And so much of the feedback I'm getting from this book is like from 22-year-olds being like, oh my God, I didn't think anyone would write a book it's this graphic and this vulgar. But it's like, I just wanted to make that point. And that's what I said to you, but like you're reading about the commercially viable. I just wanted to be like, hey, like you can write these books and like gay men will buy books, but write a book for them that's good and they'll buy it. They're not illiterate.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And so you sort of mentioned, this book, it's a bit of a memoir of, you would say, like the past 10 years of your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how would jump in if I'm wrong, but so this whole process was sort of started when you had a bit of a mental breakdown, and then you started taking notes of your life. And then those notes sort of came to be when you're writing this book. But at what point during those 10 years did you decide, or did you look at your notes and you're like, this could really come together as a memoir, or did you know the whole time?
Well, I broke up with my boyfriend when I was 23. We were in a relationship for almost 5 years. And then when we broke up, he was kind of like the Band-Aid that was keeping me alive in a lot of ways, like true codependency on my end, not on his end. And I realized like I started to date when I was 23, and I was just like a maladjusted human being. I didn't really know how to love. I didn't know how to have sex. I didn't know how to date. So what happened was, once my boyfriend and I broke up, like it was a disaster. Like I didn't know even how to live as a human being beyond the sex and relationship. So I go to this mental hospital, check in for a day. They offer no solutions. And the way the book works is it sort of like kickstarts this 10-year journey of me trying to date again. And there's all these guys I'm hooking up with, and the sex and all the madness. But it was just sort of like, I was also a writer at the time. I was published in the Chicago Tribune when I was like 22 years old. So I already had a knack for writing. So I would just keep journals. I would keep old drafts. Like you should see the previous drafts of the book. Like they're horrendous. And as I was getting better as a writer, I was writing the book. And like, truthfully, like the actual book is probably like the 4th version. So I probably rewrote that book like 4 times. And it was just sort of like, I wrote all these stories, and it was like a 10-year period, and at 33 ending now and having the podcast was interesting that it ended up being 10 years. But then there was this thread in it, and the thread my editor pointed out to me is that the book is actually like, besides me, there's a lot of gay men in the book, and it's how we all process love, how we how we get love, how we think we deserve love. Like one guy in the book I dated, he thinks he needs to buy things to get love. And so it's actually a love story. As much as it's like a ridiculous, crazy book, you realize it's how I get love. And especially for you, like doing comedy, I explain like the innate insecurity of the performer like how we live, and how like I struggle with that. Like I'm always looking for the laugh. I'm always looking to entertain. And when you do that, it's very hard to be serious and like and it's a shield, right? It's a way of like shielding ourselves from emotional pain. And so that was kind of like the idea behind it. It was just like, it's a funny book, but like by the end of the book, a lot of people are like, yeah, I laughed at your book, but by the last couple of pages, I was bawling my eyes out. And I like books that give you a taste of both, because that's the world we live in, right? Where it's kind of like a 180. We're all like complex people. It's not just like you're funny. And so that was what I really tried to do. I tried to give like the serious with the more ridiculous antics.
How did you decide what to put in the book and what not to put in? Because there's areas. I'll be perfectly honest. I haven't finished the book yet because I'm a slow ass reader, but I am slowly getting through. But like some of the stuff you're putting in is like really, really like explosive. Like it's really like, how were you able to decide? You know, was there a line that was too far, or are you just like, no, I have to be me. I have to be real.
I think my way of thinking with a lot of the stuff is sort of like similar to the podcast, where I say it and I talk about things because they happened. I think when you, and any part of your life, when you sort of like, I don't want to participate in the erasure of any part of my past because I lived in the closet for so many decades. So I think for me, it's sort of like, oh, this embarrassing story, it's vulgar, it's this, but it happened, you know, like life happens. And I think the idea that like, we're all trying to live as this avatar, as this polished person who is perfect. And I just, for me, I really didn't take anything out. I committed to the art form of saying like, yes, in the eyes of society, these antics make me look less. They make me look undesirable. Like there's insane stories in there, but I also think I'm like, they happen. And I know they've happened for thousands of other people. So I sort of feel like I just wanted to write the story I needed as a gay kid. And I kept, every time I wanted to delete something, and I'm like, no, you needed this when you were 22. You needed this book. And so I just was like, don't do it. And of course, that comes at a giant cost to my personal life, which is clearly a common theme, that keeps happening to me. When I go on Grindr, literally now, like, it's weird. I get recognized all the time. And it's kind of a nightmare.
Yeah, it can be interesting. Like, what have you had like a dating story where it just like sort of ruined your dating life? Because like for me, one of probably like my first comedy sketch that quote unquote went viral was titled Super Power Bottom. So for probably 5 years, if you Googled my name, it was Bong Super Power Bottom. And every date I would go on, they just had like this weird perception of me beforehand. And sometimes they would listen to so many like of my comedy skits that they'd come there and they'd be like regurgitating my life to me, and it would just be like, okay, like, and you don't know them yet, so it's like this weird imbalance. Like, have you ever felt that type of like somebody coming in and they just like, no?
Well, I think because our podcast was so heavily like focused on sex, just because again I was trying to make a point, and I'm done with that point now. But it just was so like I remember I hooked up with this guy in New York, and like he, in like no uncertain terms, but like pretty much was communicating to me that like he thought I was going to be some crazy porn star in bed, and he was really insecure. And I said to him, I was like, dude, I haven't slept with that many guys. It's just that I just talk about it on a microphone, and I know that's intimidating to people. And so for me, it's kind of like I pretty much only can date like 32 or older, because the insecurities that come with your 20s with like around sex and everything is just like, I just can't navigate that. But also like when I love someone and I'm like really into them, I actually become the opposite of the comedian overshare. I actually am like super private about love because I think it's really rare and I like respect it. So I think that's confusing for a lot of guys, because I think I'm just going to go on a microphone and just like talk about all their antics. But I really only talk about like mostly one night stands and like nonsense like that.
Yeah, no, it's honestly, you're so open and you always share. And that's what, that really is what draws me to you as a performer, because for me as a performer, I do tell wild stories, but I'm pretty reserved, like outside of like, let's just say I double triple think things before I like put them out there. Like I'm a little bit more yeah, I guess the word is, I don't know if polish is the right word, but it's like crafted. Like my public is a little bit crafted. So I think what I love about you is you're just so, like you're just so much more free. And actually, so let's talk about your podcaster for a little bit, because I'll just do a little bit of a rundown. The final episode was on June 18th, but it had been going on for 16 months before then. It's called the Shame on You podcast. Over 1 million downloads, 100 plus countries, the top 1 percentile of podcasts. And I really, and that's how we first met, of course, is you had me on your show. And actually, when I listened back to it, I felt kind of bad because I really wasn't that open on the show until like maybe near the end. And then I'm listening to other episodes and it's like, oh shit, I was like, I really should have done this beforehand, because like people were so open. And I was like, oh shit, I was so like not open. But I'm not sure if you're aware of this, but I actually had a bit of a epiphany when I was on your show, because you had asked, if I had prior shame. And I think my first answer was like, no, not really, because like I came out in like the fucking newspaper. Like I came out like full blast. But then I remember we were talking on the show and I was like, you know what, I came out, but then I think like 2 weeks before I was on your show, I'd actually just told my parents about my boyfriend who I've been with for 3 years. I was like, okay, so like maybe I'm a hypocrite, because I'm like, maybe I am ashamed, because why would I not tell my parents? Like I wasn't hiding it. They could check my Facebook, but I didn't actually tell them until like they were about to meet him. So anyway, I know that that's
Well, I think you kind of said that sorry to interrupt, but I think you kind of said that on the episode. You kind of like hinted at it a little bit. But I don't like to, this is the thing, Vong, like I don't really know you. So like, I feel like sometimes I just like to give people, like, listen, I've had like multiple porn stars on the show. So like, obviously when they come on, it's off limits. And I think I like to lead by example, because how much of a hypocrite would I be if I wasn't completely open, even though it came to a giant detriment to my life. But I think with you, like, I didn't want to push you, because it's like, I just think it's like everyone has their tolerance for how much they want to share. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I know. It definitely got me to open up more than I have on other podcasts. And it really made me think afterward. I was just like, wow, maybe I do have some shame that I need to work through. Because like I said, in my mind, I was always like, no, once you blast your gayness all over the internet and newspaper, like what's there to be ashamed? But I was like, no, actually. And I will say too, your podcast, not only, outside of the numbers that I've just, rattled off of its success, I would say too, just practically for me, as a performer, I get interviewed a lot in a lot of different mediums, like broadcast, radio, newspaper, stuff like that. I will tell you, I can't think of another media interview that I did that I got more feedback on than your podcast.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, for Thank you. A straight up month, the random people were like, I heard your episode on the Shame on You podcast. And I was just like, so you really did reach a lot of people. And so I guess what I want to ask is, because I know I haven't actually asked a question yet, I'm just rambling, but like no. How did that feel, having that success, that 16 months of just meteoric rise? And now that the podcast is over, like, are you able to, do you have enough distance to look back and really appreciate the success, and sort of what does it mean to you now?
I have a problem that I'm like super type A, like ambitious. I wouldn't say like ruthlessly ambitious, but I'm super like strategic. Like my career in the entertainment business is really important to me. I'm not one of those people that's very good at like just in the moment, like enjoying the moment. I remember there was this one part where we like sold out a show in New York City, that I had a moment where I was like, okay, just like enjoy this for a moment. And it, like we sold out in New York, and like we were actually about to tour the North America before coronavirus. I think the weird thing for me is like, I actually thought, listen, I always wanted to be recognized, like all of us. I think there's a difference between people who just want to be famous, like a Kardashian, but I also think there's people that just want to be recognized for their art. And I was someone who just wanted to be recognized for my art. I actually don't really like now when I go out in public and I get recognized quite often. It's actually like shocking, because I just, you can't conceptualize how many people are listening. You can see the numbers, but like, there were thousands and thousands of people in Toronto listening every week to our show. So like when I go out to a gay bar, like I get recognized and that kind of stuff. I actually don't enjoy it very much, because it feels artificial. Like I don't know how, I can't even explain it. It sounds so, but like people just look at you differently. At the end of the day, like as much as I joke about being narcissistic, like I'm just a normal dude. Like I'm an idiot. Like I don't like to be like a moral authority or any of that stuff. Like but I just think what we did was just we just took massive risks. We just talked about the things. And so when you're a gay person, you're so encouraged to be reticent in so many ways. And I think for us, it was just like we operated in a way that was like exactly the opposite of how society told us to be. Like, okay, you can be gay, but like just tone it down. And we were like, we slept with this dude, we did cocaine, like we just didn't care. And I think that's so refreshing to everybody, whether they agree with you or not.
Yeah, like yeah, it really had quite an effect, you know, on your listeners and on, you know, obviously on your life as well. What do you think is like the biggest thing that has changed in you from the beginning of the podcast till where you are now?
Well, I lost my best friend, so that's undeniable. Our friendship ended, I would say, like partially because of the podcast, but actually, like I think even if the podcast wasn't a thing, it probably would have ended other ways. I think like sometimes like there was issues, but I think sometimes people just outgrow each other, and so I don't think so. That part obviously changed, but I think for me, it's just given me this tunnel vision where I found my purpose. I like kind of realized at 30, only like probably a year and a half ago, I realized I'm like, oh, I'm a comedian. Like I didn't realize that actually. I thought I was a writer, which I still am, but I sort of like, I realized that I was funny and I was getting all this feedback. And so it's giving me this tunnel vision. Like that's why I'm starting my own show in September called Unmentionable. I'm going to put it on YouTube too, just to kind of really go for it. But it's just sort of giving me this thing to be like, oh, you're a comedian and like, you have a fan base and like you can sell out shows now and stay on this road. This is your purpose. This is your tunnel vision. Don't go off this. So I'm still going to be ridiculous. I think the thing is like when people say like your brand, it's just me. Like I'm not like, it's not like where, you know, you have like a publicist in Hollywood, whatever. I'm just like, I've always been this ridiculous, outspoken, oversharer person that's been my life. So it's kind of actually really comforting to just like be who I am while also making money.
So, you know, you are releasing this book in the middle of a pandemic, while we're all quarantined.
It's actually fantastic.
How has that experience been of like, you know, just, you know, the launch of the book itself, but also just on your personal life of, you know, it seems like this quarantine just came out of nowhere and then we're in total lockdown. Like, how did that affect your personal life and your professional life?
Well, it was actually crazy because like the day we kind of went into lockdown, I sort of was like moving into crunch time with my book where like I had to, you know, like I didn't realize that anyone who's listening to this, like when you write a book, like it's not just you write a book and maybe like you hire an editor and they make some changes. It's grueling. It's like beyond what I thought. I didn't actually prepare myself. Like I found the podcast pretty easy, but like imagine when you write it, you know, when you write an essay for school and it's like 12 pages and the teacher like rips it apart and you have multiple versions. Now do that with like 300 pages. So at the beginning of the book, like in the quarantine, I had to edit the book and like, so I actually spent like pretty much the first 2 months of the quarantine just like in the zone of editing the book. And then by the time that I moved back to Toronto, it was pretty, because I was away for like months. It was pretty much around the time that the book was coming out. So it was actually like great timing for me. But my thought process is sort of like, in some ways, it's like a silver lining because like, it's like, there's no entertainment. Everything's kind of stale right now. People can't go to concerts, they can't travel. So it's actually kind of a good time to release a book. There's just a lot of logistics issues around like printing and stuff like that that's happening they're unavoidable. But the book's doing fucking great. Like beyond the numbers, like I haven't even started my marketing campaign, which actually starts in like a week. And like the numbers are fantastic. So wow. I hope, I'm not going to say it's the quarantine. I'm going to say it's the quality of the book, but it definitely helped.
Yeah. And so, you know, it's funny. At the beginning, I kind of felt guilty too, because the quarantine kind of started right after I had done my concert film taping in January. And honestly, I was going to be on lockdown doing the rough cut of that anyway. So
Yeah.
the quarantine just kind of gave me cover for people not asking, where did you disappear to for 2 to 3 months? So, you know, it was definitely a blessing in disguise as well. And also, honestly, I'm more of a hermit when I'm not performing. I don't really like being around people. But yeah, so
I'm the opposite. I'm like very extroverted, but only with people I like. I'm total misanthrope. Like I don't really like most of the population, but I really like the people I like. And so I'm like, I love like 5 or 6 people. So that part's what's been hard for me.
So with the with the quarantine, you know, I wanted to get your thoughts more on like the bigger picture of the world, because you know you've gotten, like, from listening to your podcast, like you've also got an interest in politics, an interest, I think, in finances, things like that. But like the world is kind of, let's be honest, falling apart. Like,
I'm so glad you said that, because I think a lot of people are in denial. Yes.
Do you think this is like a moment, an opportunity that people will actually take advantage of to improve the world? Or do you just think this is like, you know, people are bored and as soon as the quarantine's over, they'll just forget all this social justice stuff?
I think and like anything in life, it's really dependent on the person. And I think it's so much of your constitution. I mean, if you are a person that was already type A and sort of had that drive, then I think you might see this as an opportunity. You might see a lot of doors open. You might reconsider a lot of things in your life. I think other people will decline more. My thoughts are on sort of a lot of the social justice side of things, and that's also kind of why I wanted to do a podcast. It's a little more responsible, because my personal life has become radioactive, but also because I'm actually like a geek. Like at the end of the day, like I read, I don't really watch TV. Like I like reading about politics, money systems, plutocrats. Like that's what I'm into. And so I think my hope is that I think hopefully that we can kind of have honest discussions about the ruling class. I think a lot of this stuff in the United States about like kind of the Black Lives Matter movement and stuff like that, I think what's missing in a lot of the virtue signaling is that this is a discussion about poverty. This is a discussion about the ruling class. This is a discussion about the opportunities afforded to certain people. And beyond the racial discussion, this is a discussion about like, I just feel like among the Black squares and a lot of these virtue signaling movements, and I think it's helpful. I think it's also negligible, but I think the larger picture is just like with the George Floyd situation, it's just like I don't feel like a lot of people are asking, why did he feel like he needed to take a counterfeit bill? It's because of the lack of opportunities available to people. People don't steal because of their race. They steal because of desperation. They steal because of the systems that are oppressing them. And I think a lot of this hasn't been about necessarily money systems and economic inequality. It's been sort of about, unfortunately, I'm seeing a lot of white people injecting themselves into the conversation for brownie points. And that's the stuff where I get cynical about, where I'm just like, I just feel like I want to hear from Black people. And when a lot of white people are talking for clout, I mean, the woman that wrote that book about white fragility, Robin DiAngelo, I think her name is, she's now giving talks for $6,000 a day to corporations about it. And I just think there's some ridiculous irony going on there when it's a white woman cleaning up financially on a discussion about race in all this. It's just like, there is some weird irony there to be like, wait a minute, wasn't this a discussion of like, why is it coming from you? Yeah. And so these are the kind of the things that interest me. I think everything in life lives in the nuance. And unfortunately, we live in a soundbite culture. We live in a siloed social media culture. And so unfortunately, I think when you live off sound bites and little 15-second clips, we don't get those in-depth kind of discussions. And that's what I want to do with my new podcast, is talk about the nuance. Everything lives in the nuance. Like, you know, you're not 100% right, but you're not 100% wrong. And this person's not. But that Venn diagram where we all kind of live doesn't get any sunlight. It's sort of just like, it's boring to people, I guess.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was really long-winded.
Oh, no, that was No, that was great. I love your passion, and if this is the direction you're taking with your new podcast, Unmentionable, is it Unmentionable or Unmentionable?
Unmentionable, yeah.
Unmentionable, launching in September,
September
right?
24th, hopefully. By the way, Vong, if you know anyone who's like a videographer, I'm looking for like a, ideally gay, but a videographer that can kind of help me with the new show. So if you know anyone, send them my way.
I'll definitely send out a message for sure. I actually do a lot of videography myself, so I could help you with the setup,
Oh,
and you can
cool.
like figure it out on your own afterward. But like, I'm certainly happy to help you with the setup, because I used to be because so for the concert film in January, I actually was I was the director and the director of photography as well. So I've got a bit of that.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, so I'm totally happy to get you set up. I know with your new podcast, you're going to be like doing like a studio setup or something. So yeah, I'm definitely, yeah, definitely
Cool.
super happy to help you get launched on that. One thing too, I wanted to jump in is, you had like very strong feelings on the election in November, particularly about Joe Biden and Donald Trump. In the
He's
U.S.
senile. Let's be honest.
Which one? Both?
They're both senile. I just think it is. Listen, I think for comedy, it's great. I mean, it is comical in the country of what 350 million that like the two guys running is like a pussy grabber who's mentally declining, and then a mentally declining man who sniffs children's hair. I mean, it is hilarious that of all the capable people in the United States, that's who they ended up with.
Mm. Yeah, I honestly, the Joe Biden thing got me really sad, because I was a big Bernie supporter.
Same, me too. Yeah.
That day, and I'm just going to put this out there. This will, because my audience is a bit more left-leaning liberal. This will get them upset at me, but I'm kind of mad at Obama, because Bernie was going to sweep Super Tuesday. And then Obama came in knowing that the establishment Democrats were kind of fractured, and he made personal calls to get everybody to drop out except for Joe Biden, so that Biden could sort of sweep that. So, whatever happens now, I do kind of blame Obama, because Bernie was so close until Obama inserted himself, and he promised he would not insert himself until the convention. So
Well, I made a point in my podcast that was, I think, really interesting about like, because I'm not necessarily, I actually play it more like center left. I think both sides are ridiculous. I kind of like live in the middle a little bit. I'm also like super left on certain issues, but I think what I found so interesting, the irony that like in the middle of a global pandemic, the one candidate in the United States that was pro universal healthcare was Bernie Sanders. And I'd also kind of railed against the plutocrats and the economic inequality of the United States. A lot of the things that were driving the divisions and were driving the consternation in the United States. And then you kind of have this candidate. And for me, it was so obvious, the anti-establishment kind of candidate. I'm no fan of Hillary Clinton. I think she's a crook. But like, I just feel like there was this one candidate that sort of was like what they needed to move into the new frontier. And I just think as an empire, the United States is pretty much on the decline. So I don't like, for me, it's just like, I just feel like at this point it's elder abuse with Biden. Like he thought his wife was his sister. He thinks he's running for Senate. Like, how much more can you try and sweep this under the rug that this is a person? And I think whoever the vice president is knows that they'll probably by default become the president.
Hopefully. Actually, I shouldn't say that. That sounds like I'm hoping for Biden to die, but
there's a lot of plaque on his brain. That's what we'll say.
One thing I want to talk to you about too is sort of this idea of the way that the people talk to each other right now, where there seemingly can't be disagreements. It's just like people screaming at each other. And I'll be perfectly honest, like I've listened to your episodes. I don't agree with everything that you say, but I appreciate
I would hope you don't. I mean, people tell me that all the time. I'm like, that's the point. That's life.
Yeah, what I love about you is like you don't like it's okay for people to disagree and to still continue talking. Like how have you felt being so outspoken during this time where people are just screaming at each other? And I'd imagine there's certain things you've said that people have just sort of gone off on in their reaction.
I don't put any weight into that because honestly, at the end of the day, like, I mean, I'm an entertainment business junkie. I think there's a real problem in the entertainment business. A lot of people get into this business, especially comedians, and they think that the point is to be liked. And that's not the point. The point is to entertain. I mean, that's so much more important than being liked. If you go into this business to being liked, you're going to play it safe. It's synonymous with being forgettable. So I don't really like when anyone says like, oh, you push buttons and stuff like that. I'm like, good. That's how you harness a fan base. That's how you kind of move ahead. If someone has a problem with something I said, that's just because there's a disagreement. But I'm not an ideologue. Like, I'm quite open to all kinds of opinions. I just sort of hate this world that we've moved into now where it's like you're on team A or you're on team B. I don't think it gets anything done. I think actually the majority of people actually move in the center and they kind of move around there. I think, like I said, everything lives in the nuance. So again, I don't care. Like, I'm just a person that doesn't care. And I think that will serve me well in this business. I don't care what anyone writes about me or says about me. They can call me what they want. I know who I am. I'm always going to speak my mind. And I think that's like so important. But I also like what I want with my new podcast is I actually want to have on people that I disagree with, because I think there's a real deficit nowadays of people just having honest conversations with people they disagree with because it's uncomfortable or because they think they won't be liked by their fan base or whatnot. Like, you know, a lot of people, I love Joe Rogan. And like, for me, everyone's like, God, how did Joe Rogan become the biggest podcast in the world? And I thought, like, I listened to him and it's because he's not so entrenched in his ideas. I mean, he's had on people that are like crazy right, like Alex Jones, or he has on Cornel West and Abby Martin, these people that are super left. But it's like, you know, Bill Maher does that well. Like, it's just like, that's what people want. And so I think on my new show, it's like, I'm going to have everybody on. I don't really care what if anyone cares me having X person on. It's just like, kind of at the end of the day, it's what interests me, really.
No, that sounds great. I will definitely be tuning in for that, for sure. And you know, actually, it'll be interesting to see, but you know, to see the different guests you have on, just sort of how you previewed it, of saying you'll have on people who don't necessarily have the same viewpoints. That should be really interesting.
I think it's so because I'm like, that's life. Like, if you set up an entire, especially with younger generation, I really noticed with the podcast is they've kind of been brainwashed to think that, and the media rewards this kind of behavior because people on Twitter are like, you know, become the mob and then, you know, there's a boycott. But it's sort of like, if you build a life in which you aren't willing to listen to people you disagree with, that's a very sheltered life. It's a very limited existence. And, you know, I guess, listen, I'm not saying society shouldn't have norms. There's some people that are going to be so crazy out there that I just don't really want to engage with them. But I like the life experiences. I like that. That is literally what life's about. It's just like meeting people that are totally different than you and finding commonality and bonding in that way. I think the way we live now is like, it lacks empathy, you know? It's just like, it's teams, it's tribalism. It's kind of gross.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of talking, but not a lot of listening, for sure. So I wanted to talk about another one of your upcoming projects. Is you're a self-described madman, and as soon as you handed in your book, you started on another book.
Yeah, I'm a maniac.
So how's that process? How's that process coming along? What can we look forward to in your next book?
Okay, well, I mean, the reality is I don't really have a lot of hobbies. I like to work. I like to write jokes. I like to podcast. That's why I'm like kind of like being out of, because I was podcasting every Thursday, sometimes twice a week because we were doing bonus episodes for like a year and a half. Like it's a lot. It was like 100 hours of audio. So I think I got used to just like doing it. I have the itch to go back. But I also am like, I love this stuff. I love entertainment business. I love making people, at the end of the day, I just think I like making people laugh because I had such a traumatic life in a lot of ways and a lot of like deep pain. So I like giving people that vacation. I like seeing a person who's like, you know, friends of mine will be going through something terrible and I love making them laugh. That's just what I'm here to do. So I just started writing the second book. It's not going to be as linear as this book. It's just sort of going to be like comedy essays, but I lived an insane life. I made out with my stepbrother. Wow. I haven't even talked about my dad. I have like I've lived an insane life. A lot of people are going to read my book and be like, wow, what else could you tell? And honestly, I left most of the good stories for the second book. So I'm just going to write it. I mean, that's what I've been doing. I've been taking edibles. I love just like taking edible, writing for a few hours alone. I truly enjoy the experience. So it's going to be as crazy as this one, but it's not going to be as like the way that, I don't know if you got to edit this book, but sort of like the way this book ends is very beautiful and very deep. And I think it's important to sort of tie the thread together. But the next book is just going to be pure laughs, comedy essays. Because also that's kind of the mood I'm in now. And I feel like this pandemic, like I don't want to get dark. It's already dark. We're all living in like a dark world. Like I don't want to be dark.
Yeah, it definitely is. Like, I don't know. It does feel like we're living in the apocalypse.
Yeah.
It's just so crazy. One final thing I wanted to ask you is, so, you know, you published your book, your first, or not your first, but your last podcast has come to an end. It sounds like you're taking a little bit of a break between launching the book, publicizing it, and then your next podcast. Do you have plans in between? And sort of like, what do the next 3 months of your life look like?
Well, I'm coming back September 24th, so I think it's probably like, yeah, I guess it's not even 3 months. I gotta get the new studio. I gotta build it. It's like a whole thing. I want to make it look good. I don't want to just launch with like some shoddy BS. Like if I'm going into like the big leagues on YouTube, I want people to like tune in and then get hooked. So I'm going to like a cool like neon feel with like a little bit of graffiti wall. I want to build like a cool, welcoming space, warm, but not have that like stilted corporate feel to it. So I'm working on that for the, and then end of September. And then I'm just going to kind of sporadically write when I feel inspired. I kind of go into, I don't know if you're like this, but I go into like creative zones where like 3 weeks I'm like killing it and then nothing. Yep. So I think I'll take advantage of those over the summer. But I don't know. I haven't really, like, I'm not really vacationing, obviously. I haven't really been doing much. I'm just sort of excited to get the studio going. And I have so many ideas for the new show. Like, it's kind of, for me, it's like a mix of the podcasts I listen to. I love Joe Rogan. I love Howard Stern. I love Tim Dillon. Like, I love a different mix. So I kind of want to take parts of each of those podcasts and find a way to incorporate them into my own. But I also want to be outrageous. Like, I like pushing buttons. I like going there, because I think a lot of the comedians that I love that have had great careers, like the Joan Rivers, the Dave Chappelle's, like, they pushed it. And I think a lot of comedians are against that because they want to be liked. And I think you have to like push through that comfort zone and be like, oh no, a lot of people aren't going to like me, but like a lot of people are going to love me. And that's the polarization of who I am as a person.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know, so my boyfriend works in politics, and what he told me was, in politics, the reaction you generally want is like 70% in favor, 30% not in favor, because that'll last in the news cycle. If you're 80, 90%, everybody agrees, then it'll like fall right off the news cycle. So you do kind of need that that back and forth. But I just want to wrap this up. I want to thank you again for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
To our listeners, once again, go out now. Famous Anus, Stories from a Decade of Sinfluence. Paperback on Amazon, ebook on Kindle, iPad, and all the other stores out there. And upcoming September 24th, check out Jordan's new podcast, Unmentionable. And thank you again, listeners. And we will be back we record on Sunday, but we'll be back next Monday when I upload.
Thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Are we still on?
We are still on.
Bye, famous anus.
Give me a second to turn everything off.